Good evening, colleagues. Welcome on our webinar related to ransomware. I know that some of you have attended our first edition and we had some technical details related to sound. That was not our fault, but still sorry for wasting your time. Welcome on the second try. I hope that today everything will be shiny and working good. So my name is Dmitry Galov. I'm working as a security researcher at Kaspersky. And today we'll talk about ransomware and about the trends that we see this year and those shifts that we observe related to, for example, some situations and things that happened recently. So I'm presenting the Global Research and Analysis team. This is a team of researchers that are based in different countries. We are about 45 people in about 20 different countries, and we're investigating and researching things related to advanced persistent threats, financial threats, ransomware, threats related to the technologies of tomorrow, and so on. Such structure of our group helps us to be in close touch with our customers and be aware of the most sophisticated and modern threats that are based in different regions. So we're not the only one, not the only center of expertise of Kaspersky. We do have other guys who are working on, for example, red teaming, or we have people who are doing research in critical infrastructure and trying to find vulnerabilities and protect against them. And we do provide the solutions that help us save and protect our customers, B2C, B2B, it doesn't matter. But except that we're trying to provide threat intelligence to our customers, because we do have a huge amount of different sources from our partners, customers, from open source resources, from different traps and technologies that we are trying to analyze and provide in an easily digestible, let's say so, format for our customers. So what are the global cyber security challenges in this year? Let's start with money and with the average cost of a breach for different companies. Based on the information that we have from the previous year, the average cost of such a breach for SMB is about $100, and for enterprise customers, it's more than $1 million. And it is really good that 68% of business leaders understand that the cybersecurity risks are increasing, and they are starting investing more time, effort, and money for trying to build protection and to protect their companies. And if we have a look at what threats are the most popular and the most widespread, they are related to financially motivated threats, and cyber criminals are mainly trying to get financial gain, and we can see that 71% of such attacks are financially motivated. And a big share and a very important share of all those financially motivated attacks are related to ransomware. If we have a look at the statistics from Q1 of this year, only our products protected more than 74,000 unique users from various ransomware attacks. If we just have a step back from ransomware, and we'll talk about that definitely, and just have a recap of what we see globally in the cybersecurity landscape. At first, we can divide everything that we see right now in three different categories. The first one is related to traditional cybercrime, the second one is targeted threats, and the third one is APT. So today we'll mostly be talking about targeted attacks, and even the fact that they are smaller in terms of quantity related to traditional crimeware, they bring more money for, much more money for the cyber criminals nowadays. So what are cyber criminals are attacking, and what are things they're working on? The first thing is that this year we still saw a lot of things around COVID-19 and attackers trying to use this topic in their spear phishing attacks and so on. But for now, obviously, geopolitical situation is more used in such ways. So also, COVID-19 brought us remote working, and attacks on remote access are still popular, and we'll see the statistics in just a couple minutes. Also, we saw different cases related to mobile stories, to non-Windows stories. There are vast diversity of new implants and new exploits, for example, that were used by the cyber criminals. For the big companies, supply chain attacks are very important and very dangerous right now. And one of the most important numbers is, in my opinion, is that if we take all the exploitation attacks during different exploitation vectors and have a look at what products were trying to be compromised, a bit less than half of them were related to Microsoft Office. And that means that it once more highlights the importance of getting your software updated and keeping track of that. So, but let's get back to ransomware, and it's the main topic for our webinar today. So, the ransomware world started not yesterday. It is a story of more than 15 years of evolution and different stories related to this cyber threat. So even back then in 2006, we already analyzed different ransomware tools. After that, we tried to collaborate with different agencies helping to prevent attacks and developing such platforms as No More Ransom, that we'll talk a bit later about as well. And then it just, so it is a normal evolution. We've seen different techniques, different customers being attacked, different big players on this in this field, but that's not so much important because history is history, and we should think about today. And as we can see, so we had a survey. By the way, you can have a look at it. It is attached to the webinar. It was a big survey among different C-level managers and people taking decisions about cybersecurity in different companies all over the world. And 100% of them said that yes, they know the word ransomware, and it's quite a buzzword. So even a couple of weeks ago, we had let's say a holiday that is called Anti-Ransomware Day, that is trying to highlight once more that this threat is important and we should fight it together. Even 67% of the respondents said that they've heard a lot and they know everything. So let's think about that. But 60% of them believe that media is covering ransomware in a way that shows the threat bigger than it is, but despite the fact, they still anticipate attacks on their business. So also from that survey, an interesting fact is that we asked the respondents what is the most, what is the possibility of arise cyber attacks on their company and what are they let's say afraid of. So ransomware and data theft were on the first place, and as we know that these two threats sometimes come together, and we'll talk about that as well. But it's really interesting that they're not so much afraid, for example, of denial of service attacks or different APTs, but ransomware. Ransomware is number one. So again, it once more highlights the importance of this question. Despite the fact that, as we have seen, all the people know about ransomware, there are still some myths related to this cyber threat, and I'll spend just a couple minutes trying to talk about that and say that they are not quite correct. The first one is that ransomware gangs are gangs, and people are thinking that there are some cyber criminals sitting around the table trying to attack some companies, doing all the cycle of the attack from getting initial access till, for example, money laundering and all that things on their own. It's actually not like that. This is a very big ecosystem with different players, and we'll shortly have a closer look at this ecosystem and different services that are provided in there. The second one is that targeted ransomware is targeted. So when some kind of company is being attacked, then people are saying that someone was trying to hunt this particular company and attack it. Actually, when we're talking about financially motivated groups, they're trying to hunt for the low-hanging fruit, and they are trying to find and get access to as many internal infrastructures as possible. Only after that, trying to understand where are they and is it interesting for them to attack and go on with this ransomware activity or not. The third one is that cyber criminals are criminals, and there are two different ways of talking about that. The first one is that cyber criminals that are doing ransomware attacks are low level in technical perspective, and that they are people who are been robbing us in the streets a while ago, and now they're just living in the sitting, working remotely, just like trying to get money from the companies. Actually, it's not like that. This is a highly sophisticated threat, and people who are developing it have a lot of knowledge, for example, about cryptography or things like that. The second thing is that ransomware is not always targeted, and it is like, it is not always financially motivated. So sometimes it is targeted, and it targets the precise company and tries to just destroy its operations, to destabilize something. So we've seen such cases in the previous years a lot. So let's talk a bit about numbers that are related to ransomware. We won't talk about all of them, but some highlights. The first one is, my opinion, I think that if we have a look at the ways of getting initial access against the companies, the first one is brute force attacks. And as far as I know, this number was lower a while ago, and I think that remote working and all those attacks against even, I don't know, against RDP accesses brings results for the attackers. And the spear phishing is still in top 3, so it again highlights the importance of getting your employees educated about cyber security and giving them awareness about such problems. Talking about the consequences, the top 2 levels of bad consequences for companies is encrypted data and data leakage. And as we know that double extortion is quite common in ransomware. So people are trying, cyber criminals are trying at first to leak the data, then encrypt it. And so they have 2 different ways of pushing the victim at first, not giving back access to the data, then publishing it and destroying the company in financial or another way as well. So also it is interesting that industrial enterprises are top level. They're on the first place in terms of among the attacks that we observed. So again, these statistics are based on the previous year. This year probably this will change. We'll see in the future. So what are the trends? We've talked about some general things and general, numbers and techniques that ransomware cyber criminals are using. But what are the trends that we're observing right now? The first one is that threat actors are trying to develop cross-platform ransomware to be as adaptive as possible. What does it mean? It means that different threat actors, some of them that we've seen in previous years, some of them are brand new, or some of them are rebranded groups that we already observed before. They're trying to use, for example, Golang or Rust in order to develop cross-platform ransomware and be ready for attacking any kind of company that has different architectures implemented inside. Sometimes this technique is also used as an example of deadbolt that was developed in Golang, and it made it possible for the attackers to make attacks against QNAP NAS systems when someone found some kind of a zero-day that made it possible for them to get initial access. That was quite convenient, and as for now, it is quite a good showcase of what consequences can come because of such attackers being flexible. Also, Black Cat and is developing it in Rust and attacking different platforms. Conti is not using cross-platform languages. They do have different versions for both Windows and ESXi systems, and they are just like giving access to this Linux and the XXI system version only for selected affiliates. So the second trend that we do see is that ransomware is getting more and more industrialized, and I mean that ransomware is a big ecosystem, and I've already highlighted it in the very beginning of the presentation, and there is a lot of money in this industry, and that means that different subgroups are created, and to understand how all this ecosystem works, we can just separate the whole cycle of attack in different short periods. So let's start with the initial access. So as you can remember, I said that cyber criminals are trying to hunt for the low-hanging fruit, and they are trying to buy initial accesses to some machines in corporate networks from botmasters or account resellers, and only after that, after gaining this initial access, they are giving it to another group of cyber criminals, the red team, that are trying to get to do lateral movement, because obviously it is interesting not to attack one single machine, but try to destroy as many of them inside the network as possible. After that, they have to exfiltrate data for both trying to extort money for not leaking it. Plus, it gives their analysts an opportunity to understand what is the company, for example, what is the revenue of the company, and therefore understand what is the amount of, also how big should be the ransom. And only after that, they encrypt the system. After that, when everything is done, all technical part is done, some of the big groups have, let's say, like PR teams of negotiators who are talking to the victims, giving them assistance and in terms of paying money and explaining them what are the potential consequences for the victims of not doing that. Even if everything, all this cycle is successful, and they get some kind of cryptocurrency as ransom, they should launder it, they should distribute it among all these people who took part. So again, I'm highlighting all of them separately because mostly all those sub-teams are just, they're totally separated. They don't know each other. They're just providing services. They're affiliates who are, for example, so if we are talking about the traditional ransomware operators, these are only ransomware developers. And so those people who are developing the actual ransomware, who are developing the platform for data leakage, the platform for negotiations with the victims, but these are only the developers, and all the others are affiliates or service providers. And There are some exclusions, obviously, and for example, there are some state-sponsored APT actors who can do all the cycle and provide just like to work separately. And we know those cases when for example, some North Korean state-sponsored APT actors, they had their own subgroups that were financially motivated, and among other activities, they were also developing ransomware and attacking different companies, also just like extorting money. So you may say that it is interesting, but it is not much of importance or value of understanding how it works, but we'll come back to it a bit later when we'll be talking about securing the companies, and you'll understand that it is vital to know how cyber criminals work. And again, so the biggest trend is that not this year it all happened. We've seen this ecosystem for a while, for years, but we see that they are trying to develop as much tools, for example, for the affiliates as possible, to develop easy to go and easy to use tools for them. A good example is, let's say, Steelbit, that is an exfiltration tool from Lockbit that is provided together with the ransomware to make it easier and quicker for the affiliates to exfiltrate data from the network. And it is obviously vital that to do it as quickly as possible, while security officers can't stop it in seconds. But so it just like more and more money gets inside this ecosystem, and because of that, services and ransomware developers are just getting more and more mature. So the third trend is that unfortunately ransomware gangs are taking sides in geopolitical conflicts, and we can't close our eyes. We see that some geopolitical tensions are in the world, and we see examples of different ransomware gangs also reflecting it in their operations. So on the slide you can see only some of the examples of ransomware groups, new ones or old ones, that are taking part in these tensions. For example, Conti officially announced that they're fully supporting Russian government. And on the other side, we can see Freud. It is a brand new ransomware that we found like a month or a bit more ago, that was brand new, developed from scratch, and for example, it didn't contain any kind of financial requests to decrypt the files. The only ransomware node contained political or just like political requests of troops leaving Ukraine. And this is like a very good example of how polarized can be the world in such situations. And even those groups, some of the groups that were only financially motivated before, they are switching to wipers, and they are just like, even they understand that they won't get any financial gain, but they wipe the infrastructure. We see new wipers being developed, for example, the 00 that was highlighted. This threat was highlighted by Ukrainian CERT in March. So we should admit that some cybercriminal groups are trying to show their geopolitical attitude. Even some of the groups can get separated in this conflict, and we've seen even some internal documents and messages being published because of such tensions inside the cybercriminal groups. So as for me, it is not so much important why such things happen. For me, it is more important to understand that they start to happen, and it helps us again to protect our customers from such versions, such segments of cyber threats. So our main goal is not to scare anyone or to just show some interesting information and some highlights. The most important part is to give some advice and give some protections to the customers, and there are ways to stay protected. So if you have already said that, we'll come back to that scheme of cyber criminals working together and different periods of attack. So if we put all that workflow on the internal infrastructure of the company and try to have a look at what critical segments are there for the attackers, and try to highlight and to monitor all of them, and just like if we even separate it very roughly in initial access, consolidation and preparation and impact, and on every section we try to build a workflow of how attackers are trying to, for example, get access to, just like how they are doing the lateral movement, for example, and we understand what monitoring should be done. It makes it easier to stop this attack at least one of the segments, and not make it just like make it harder and harder for the attackers to get to the final to their final destination, to their final goal. So this is called let's say some kind of cyber kill chain for ransomware, and I think make a small announcement that we're our colleagues from anti-malware research team are preparing a very big research on this topic about building a cyber kill chain that will make it possible to protect companies without thinking about which exact ransomware is attacking it, just like thinking only about the workflow. I think that if you're interested, in the nearest future, there will be publications related to that. Just a small advertisement from my side. And again, coming back to monitoring, because you can say, well, monitoring is something abstract and not easy to organize inside the internal network, but related to another report from our colleagues from incident response team, they monitored the percentage of those, like they monitored the most popular and mostly used tools by ransomware gangs. And if you look at the slide, all of them are on them. It's just a couple dozen of them, and if monitoring them, it shows the percentage of how many ransomware attacks will be stopped if you just properly monitor usage of such tools. Well, we should admit that sometimes ransomware gangs get access and they encrypt everything, and then it comes to the question that to pay or not to pay to them. And obviously, it is a question about risk management, and for some companies, it can seem to be an easy way out to pay some ransom because they understand what are the potential financial and other risks that they might have if they do not do that. And there are even like very disastrous stories, for example, of City of Baltimore that refused to pay ransom of a bit more than $70,000, and over the time, like they mounted it to 20 million. So it is not our story; it is related to some official statements that they've done. So if you're interested, you can check out this story. But based on the research that was done in 2020. 68% of the respondents said that they paid the ransom when they faced such kind of an attack. We had another survey that I've been talking in the very beginning. We also asked the companies, did they pay or not? What is their attitude? And the first interesting number is that we understood that about 64% of the organizations that we asked about ransomware have already been a victim of ransomware attack, and that's a lot. That's a lot of them. And so, just like talking about what did they do when an attack happened, you can see that 38% of them paid as soon as possible for getting immediate access. And this is only those who done that immediately. And if you sum it up with the 27% of those who paid within 2 days and 14% of them who paid within a week, it's a lot. And we can see that only 19% were able to get money back, get the data back without paying. And we'll come to it a bit later. But just think about the number. Only 1% of them didn't pay and didn't get the data. Only 1% of them. So another interesting statistic, we asked the respondents what will they do if a ransomware attack happens again. We can see that the numbers are way much better than what they said about the previous attacks that have already happened. You can see that only if they say that only 27% will immediately pay the ransom. But again, despite this fact, despite these good trends that we see, 97% of them, 97% of those respondents who have already paid for the first time, they will pay again. So why is it important, and why do we actually care about paying or not paying, and trying to find those trends and asking companies? That's just because we think that the only way to stop ransomware, not just like in a global way, in a global term of that, is to stop paying the ransom. Because while companies are paying, they're just investing in this ecosystem of different players, different subgroups who are getting more and more money for developing their tools and their techniques. So we are trying to collaborate with other organizations, for example, on the basis of No More Ransom project, when we are trying to provide on the free basis some recovery tools that can help companies to recover their data if it is possible, because sometimes some criminals, for example, have flaws in their cryptography that they're using for encryption, and in such cases we can provide a decryption tool for free. So another good thing is that not so long ago, an international company called A/B-Test, who are doing research and analysis of different cybersecurity solutions, they had their publication about anti-ransomware tools, and it is an honor for me to say that Kaspersky was top 1 product which helped to block all the 100% attacks that were done during the tests. So I've left a link if you are interested in more precise information about how it was done and more precise results. You can follow the link and just have a look. So what are the general rules to protect companies from ransomware? We already had a look at the cyber kill chain and all those quite abstract things about building internal cybersecurity but cybersecurity infrastructure inside the company. But if we think about that, there are simpler and easier rules and advice that I can give. The first one is that detecting lateral movement and data exfiltration and all those things that we've been talking about, cyber kill chain, sometimes is easy but effective. Updates of software is vital, and as you can remember that when we've been analyzing exploitation of different vulnerabilities, even such products that like Microsoft Office can be used very actively to exploit and get some initial access. Also, we should admit that some ransomware protection tools for endpoints should be used, even if you have some corporate security. Endpoints are still important, and we even in Kaspersky have a separate tool called anti-ransomware tool for business that makes it possible to protect endpoint machines inside the infrastructure against ransomware. And as you can remember, in the previous slide, I've shown that Kaspersky products are top one according to independent researchers. Also, it is still important to think about backups, and we should admit that there is no system that is 100% secure, and we should think about and do the backups and have some trainings when we try to restore our business, our company from a backup, to be ready for any kind of situation that can happen. Awareness is very important, and it is related not only to high-level professional, for example, SOC engineers that should get their trainings, their professional trainings. And for example, we do have a product called Kaspersky Expert Security Framework that helps give such professional trainings, but also trainings about cyber security awareness is important for all the other all the other employees, because as you can remember, about a quarter of all the attacks started with spear phishing, and awareness and cybersecurity awareness is one of the only things that can minimize such threats. Also, threat intelligence is very important, and we're working on our portfolio related to threat intelligence. We do have our threat intelligence portal. I'm personally working on one of the sub-projects related to this portal, analyzing crimeware, ransomware, and other things. So it is very technical, and it helps your, for example, SOC team to be aware of the latest trends and the latest threats. As I've already said, that you should never pay the cyber criminals, and this is the only way to stop this industry from growing, prospering, and developing further. So I think that together we can just convince more and more companies, helping them to fight against ransomware, not to pay. So coming back to the current situation related to different things happening around the world, we understand that the world and the time is very challenging and uncertain. And we help to protect our customers in any country from cyber threats. So we are trying to give such threat intelligence information freely, and we try to give it out to companies who need that. So we have our platform. You can follow the link and leave just fill up the form and get access for some time to just use this special offer and get free access to our threat intelligence for a while, and help your company to survive and protect in such turbulent and hard times. So that's it for today. I hope that it was interesting for you from different perspectives, from both understanding what the trends we see right now in the ecosystem, and from the perspective of some advice and techniques that can be used to protect your company. But again, this is just a part of the story. You have already seen that there is 16 years of development in the story of ransomware, and unfortunately, we'll see some years ahead as well. So for now, we're trying just to publish and to talk about some different changes, even small changes that we see in this field. So thanks a lot. I think that we do have plenty of time to answer your questions. So there are a couple of them. I'll answer them. So first one, how does cross-platform ransomware work? That means that this ransomware is developed using the cross-platform programming language that makes it possible just to compile it for the architecture that you are willing to attack. So it is just not okay. Then if I know what ransomware is out there and what it does, how I can prepare my defenses. If my company only has a handful of cybersec specialists, do we stand a chance against the attack? Yes, for sure. It is not about the amount of the specialists that you have. Obviously, sometimes it is, but even several people who are aware, who are trained enough, and who, for example, can handle those cybersecurity solutions that your company is buying and using, you can still protect. Talking about how can I prepare my defenses, I hope that in the very end of the presentation I answered your question. There is like a list of different tips that were given for the companies and different technologies and products that were provided. So what is the role of Conti in the current ransomware landscape? They seem to be very active lately. Yes, Conti is one of the most active and one of the biggest players in the ransomware scene right now. We do have different publications related to Conti and to different tool set that they're using, and there's a lot of things, not only from us, but from other players of threat intelligence business as well. So in 2 words, yes, they are very active lately, and they are one of the stakeholders, one of the big players of this threat. So I think that pretty all the questions that have been in the chat answered. I think that you will have an opportunity to check out the materials that are attached to the webinar. Plus, you will be able to address some further questions, and we'll answer them after the end by email or something like that. So some of you are asking about the slides. I think that the full slide deck and also the video recording of the webinar will be available. So while we are finished, in just like shortly, it will be available. So let's call it a day. Thanks everyone for coming today. Thanks even more for those who tried to attend the webinar last time but didn't manage to do it due to technical issues. Hope today everything was cool. Thanks a lot. Ciao, ciao.